They thought I was weak, the quiet wife who wouldn't fight back. But after my father-in-law's fist left me breathless on the floor and my husband told me to apologize, I showed them what happens when you underestimate a woman with power they never imagined. That Thanksgiving night changed everything. While they saw submission in my silence, I was already calculating their downfall. The bruise on my face would fade, but the $61 million I controlled, that was about to become their worst nightmare. My name is Elena Ward, and at 38 years old, I thought I'd seen the worst of what the Caldwell family could dish out. I was wrong. The crystal chandelier above the Thanksgiving table cast perfect light on the disaster about to unfold. 22 people gathered around the mahogany table that had been in Robert Caldwell's family for 5 generations or so. He loved to remind everyone within earshot. The Ohio estate sprawled across 40 acres, each room designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Persian rugs worth more than most people's annual salaries cushioned our feet. Original oil paintings stared down from the walls like disapproving ancestors. I sat 3 seats down from Robert, my father-in-law, watching him hold court at the head of the table. His thick fingers wrapped around a glass of 30-year-old scotch, his 4th since dinner started at 6:30 p.m. Patricia, my mother-in-law, perched beside him in her St. John suit, nodding along to his monologue about the degradation of American values. "The problem with this country," Robert boomed, his voice carrying over the clink of silverware, "is that we've forgotten what real breeding means, real heritage." His eyes found mine across the table. "Some people understand quality because they're born into it. Others—" He paused, letting his gaze travel over my simple black dress. Ann Taylor, not designer. "Others think they can buy their way in." Mark, my husband, shifted uncomfortably beside me but said nothing. His hand didn't reach for mine under the table. He kept cutting his turkey with mechanical precision, jaw tight. "I'm curious, Robert," I heard myself say. The table quieted. "What exactly constitutes real breeding in your opinion?" He leaned back, chair creaking under his 240-pound frame. "Well, Elena, it's about lineage, education from the right institutions, connections that go back generations. Not," he gestured vaguely, "state schools and shopping mall jobs." The reference stung as intended. I'd worked at Macy's to pay for my degree at Cleveland State. Robert never let me forget it, even 12 years into my marriage to his son. "Interesting perspective," I replied, setting down my fork. "Though I'd argue that earning one's position through merit rather than inheritance shows more character." The silence stretched taut as piano wire. Robert's face flushed red, starting from his neck and spreading upward like spilled wine on white carpet. "Merit." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against hardwood. "You dare lecture me about merit in my own home. You, who came here with nothing, married my son for his name, his money." "That's enough, Dad," Mark finally interjected, though his voice lacked conviction. "No, it's not enough." Robert rounded the table toward me. The scotch fumes preceded him. "This ungrateful woman needs to learn respect." I stood to meet him, though he towered over my 5'6" frame. "Respect is earned, Robert, not inherited." The crack of his knuckles against my cheekbone happened so fast that several people gasped before I even hit the floor. Pain exploded across the left side of my face. The room tilted. I tasted copper blood from where my teeth cut into my cheek. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard chairs scraping, Patricia's shrill, "Robert," and various cousins murmuring in shock. But clearest of all was Mark's voice, not rushing to help me up, not confronting his father, but directed at me as I struggled to my knees. "Elena, just apologize. Now, you've ruined Thanksgiving." I looked up at him through one already swelling eye. My husband of 12 years stood there in his Brooks Brothers suit, more concerned about family harmony than the blood trickling from my mouth. Behind him, Robert straightened his tie, completely unrepentant. "Apologize," Mark repeated, harder this time, I pulled myself to my feet without anyone's help. The room swayed slightly, but I stayed upright. 21 faces stared at me, some horrified, some embarrassed, none defending me. I touched my fingertips to my throbbing cheekbone, and they came away red, without a word. I walked out of that dining room, my heels clicking against the floor in steady rhythm despite the pain radiating through my skull. I heard Mark call after me once, half-heartedly, but he didn't follow. In the marble powder room, I examined the damage in the gilt mirror. The bruise was already forming, purple-black spreading like an oil stain. My eye would be swollen shut by morning, but as I stared at my reflection, blood on my lip, designer mascara smeared, dignity shattered, something fundamental shifted inside me. They thought I was weak, defenseless, dependent. They had no idea who they'd just declared war on. The drive home from the Caldwell estate took 45 minutes through empty Ohio highways. Mark didn't come with me. He stayed to smooth things over with his family, to apologize for my behavior. I sat alone in my Toyota Highlander, deliberately middle class, deliberately forgettable, and let the truth of my situation wash over me like ice water. They all believed the lie I'd carefully crafted for 12 years. To Mark and his family, I was Elena Ward, the fortunate girl from the wrong side of Cleveland who'd married up, a financial analyst at Ironwood Capital Strategies who did back-office work, Mark's dismissive term for what he assumed was data entry and spreadsheet management. He'd never asked for details, never wondered why I often worked late, why I took calls in my home office with the door locked, why I insisted on maintaining separate bank accounts for independence. The truth was so much more delicious. I pulled into our suburban home's garage at 11:45 p.m. and headed straight for my office, the room Mark never entered, respecting what he thought was my little space for my little job. I locked the door, opened the false bottom in my desk drawer, and pulled out the laptop he didn't know existed. The screen illuminated my battered face as I logged into my real life. Account after account flashed before me. Shell companies layered like Russian dolls, Artemis Holdings, Cascade Ventures, Meridian Trust, and 17 others, each one a carefully constructed entity designed to hide the fortune I'd built in shadows. The numbers still made my pulse quicken. $372 million spread across various investments, real estate holdings, and liquid assets. It started small, back when I actually was that struggling analyst at Ironwood. But I had something my colleagues lacked, an almost supernatural ability to spot patterns others missed. While they focused on obvious metrics, I tracked the subtle executive flight patterns, unusual patent filings in seemingly unrelated industries, changes in supplier contracts that suggested pivots months before announcements. My first real win came 8 years ago. I noticed a pattern of land purchases around a failing strip mall in Akron shell companies buying worthless property for cash. I dug deeper, found connections to a major tech company planning a distribution center. I borrowed against our house without Mark knowing. He never read the documents he signed, and bought 3 acres through my first shell company. 18 months later, I sold it for 12 times what I paid. That $12 million became my seed money for everything else. I kept my job at Ironwood as cover, eventually becoming senior portfolio analyst, a position that gave me access to even more information, more patterns, more opportunities. My bosses thought I was good. They had no idea I was using their own data streams to build something that dwarfed their entire operation. The clothing helped maintain the illusion. I shopped at Target and Kohl's, wore modest jewelry, drove that 5-year-old Highlander. When the Caldwells sneered at my department store style, I smiled and endured it. Let them think I coveted Patricia's Hermes bags and vintage Cartier. The watch I wore, a simple Timex, sat on the same wrist that signed wire transfers worth more than their entire estate. But the masterstroke, the one that still made me smile even through tonight's pain, happened 3 years ago. Through a Byzantine series of acquisitions and mergers I'd orchestrated through my shells, I'd gained controlling interest in Pinnacle Financial Services. Pinnacle was a small, regional firm that handled wealth management for Ohio's old money families, including the Caldwells. Robert had no idea that when he bragged about his family's financial wisdom, about their diversified portfolio and impressive returns, he was actually bragging about my decisions. I controlled the very firm that managed the $61 million in liquid assets he loved to hint at during country club lunches. I opened another screen, pulling up the Caldwell family's complete financial picture. It was worse than even Robert knew. Patricia's spending had accelerated $3 million on jewelry alone this year. Their estate carried 2 mortgages. Robert had borrowed against his company's assets to cover what I now realized were significant gambling debts. The construction company that bore his family name for 90 years was a house of cards, and I held the foundation. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "Staying at my parents' tonight. We need to talk about your behavior. Mom is beside herself." I touched my swollen eye and almost laughed. His mother was beside herself. I was the one with the bruised face. But Patricia's comfort was the concern. I typed back, "Of course. Take all the time you need." Then I opened a new encrypted folder labeled Thanksgiving and began documenting everything. The assault, the witnesses, Mark's response, timestamps, photos of my injuries, audio recordings from my phone that had been in my pocket during dinner. They thought I was powerless, trapped in a marriage where I needed them more than they needed me. Tomorrow, they'd begin learning how wrong they were. The next morning at 8:15 a.m., I sat across from Sarah Jennings in her downtown Cleveland office. Sarah had been my attorney for 7 years. Though Mark believed she only handled my personal investments, the small portfolio he knew about worth roughly $200,000, the bruise on my face had bloomed into a spectacular purple-black masterpiece overnight. "Jesus Christ, Elena!" Sarah set down her coffee hard enough to slosh. "Please tell me you're pressing charges." "I need something more comprehensive than criminal charges," I said, sliding a flash drive across her desk. "I need you to help me dissect the Caldwell empire." Sarah had helped structure my shell companies, knew about my real wealth. She was the only person on earth who did. But even she didn't know about my control over Pinnacle Financial Services. I'd kept that card close, waiting for the moment I might need it. "What am I looking at?" she asked, plugging in the drive. "Everything. Robert Caldwell's financial records, his company's books, his personal debts, all legally obtained through my position at Ironwood, and other sources." Sarah's eyes widened as she scrolled. "Elena, this is... How did you..." "The how doesn't matter. What matters is what it shows." She leaned back, lawyer mode engaging. "Walk me through it." I opened my own laptop, projecting documents onto her wall screen. Caldwell Manufacturing looks solid from the outside. 90-year-old company, government contracts, steady revenue around $40 million annually. But look closer. I highlighted lines in the financial statements. Robert's been bleeding it dry. Executive bonuses that don't match profit margins. Suspicious consultant fees paid to offshore accounts. He's pulled $8 million out in the last 18 months alone. Embezzlement from his own company. Technically legal since he owns 51%, but it violates the terms of several major contracts and loan covenants. Now look at this. I switched screens to show casino records obtained through a connection I'd cultivated at the Gaming Commission. $15 million in gambling debts over 3 years, high-stakes poker, sports betting, some questionable underground games. Sarah whistled low. He's using company funds to cover personal gambling. It gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. I pulled up property records. The family estate double mortgaged. Patricia doesn't know about the second one Robert forged her signature. Their investment portfolio is leveraged to the hilt. The only thing keeping them afloat is this. I showed her the Pinnacle Financial Services accounts. $61 million in liquid assets, managed by Pinnacle. It's their emergency fund, their retirement, their everything. Without it, they're not just broke, they're $20 million in the hole. Sarah studied the screen. "And you're telling me this because..." "Because I control Pinnacle." The silence stretched for 30 seconds while Sarah processed. "You control the firm managing their money." "Through a series of shells. Yes, they have no idea." Robert sits in his study, checking his accounts, feeling secure because the numbers keep growing. He doesn't know I'm the one deciding where every penny gets invested. Holy shit, Elena. There's more. I pulled up emails between Robert and several city council members. Bribes for construction permits, tax assessments mysteriously lowered, a competitor's bid mysteriously rejected after Robert had dinner with the planning commissioner. Sarah was taking notes now, rapidly. This is enough to bury him, but Elena, if you expose this, it's nuclear. Mark's family will be destroyed. Mark chose his side when he told me to apologize for getting punched in the face. What about his sister, his cousins, the employees at Caldwell Manufacturing? I'd thought about this all night. I can structure it to minimize collateral damage. The company can survive if Robert's removed and it's restructured properly. The employee's pension fund is separate. I made sure of that 2 years ago when I quietly influenced Pinnacle to isolate it from Robert's reach. You've been planning this for 2 years. I've been protecting myself for 2 years. There's a difference. I touched my bruised face. I always knew something like this might happen. I just didn't know it would be this. Blatant. Sarah pulled up legal precedents on her computer. If we move forward, we need to do it surgically. Freezing their assets through Pinnacle that's legal given the evidence of potential fraud, but the timing has to be perfect. I want to give them a chance first, I said. One opportunity to make this right. After what Robert did to you, I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it so that when I destroy them, no one can say I didn't try to be reasonable first. Sarah nodded slowly. You want the moral high ground. I want to be bulletproof. When this comes out, and it will, I need everyone to know that I tried to handle it quietly, privately, with dignity, and they refused. What's your timeline? Mark's still at his parents' house. He texted this morning that he wants to discuss terms for moving forward. I'm betting they're planning some kind of intervention. Patricia loves those, makes her feel like she's in a Lifetime movie. You think they'll try to pressure you? I know they will. They think I'm financially dependent on Mark. They think I'll cave to keep my comfortable life. I smiled, and it hurt my bruised face. They're about to learn otherwise. Sarah pulled out her legal pad. All right, let's build your weapon. What do you want to happen? First, we document everything. Then, we prepare 2 packages, one for the authorities if needed, one for the Caldwells showing them exactly what I have, and then we wait for them to make their next move. And the $61 million stays exactly where it is, for now. But the moment they push too hard, I traced my finger across my throat. Sarah smiled grimly. Remind me never to piss you off? You'd never punch me in the face and tell me to apologize for bleeding. Mark came home 3 days after Thanksgiving, at 7:20 p.m., on a Sunday. I heard his Mercedes in the driveway, the one his father bought him, of course, and continued chopping vegetables for my dinner. Dinner for one, as it had been all weekend. He walked into the kitchen with the confidence of a man who expected apologies and submission. His cologne, Tom Ford because Robert wore Tom Ford, preceded him into the room. He stopped short when he saw my face. The bruise had evolved into a spectacular array of purple, green, and yellow that no amount of concealer could hide. Elena. He stood by the island, not coming closer. You look like someone punched me in the face. He had the decency to wince. That's not. Dad didn't mean to hit you that hard. Oh, so he meant to hit me gently. Don't twist my words. Mark loosened his tie. Hermes, a gift from Patricia. Everything he wore, drove, or owned came from them. You provoked him by suggesting that earning success might be more admirable than inheriting it, by disrespecting him in his own home, in front of the entire family. Mark's voice hardened. You embarrassed everyone. I set down the knife carefully, turned to face him fully. Your father assaulted me, Mark, in front of 21 witnesses, and your response was to demand I apologize. Because that would have de-escalated. Would you have apologized if he'd punched you? He would never punch me. Because you're his son, or because you'd never stand up to him. Mark's face flushed red. the same tell as his father. I came here to discuss how we move forward, not to be attacked. How generous of you. I returned to chopping carrots, each slice precise. And what terms are you offering for our future? He pulled out his phone, reading from what were obviously prepared notes. Someone, Patricia, probably had coached him. First, you'll apologize to my father, publicly, at the Christmas party next month. Continue. You'll start attending the family therapist Mom recommends, Dr. Meredith Sawyer. She specializes in helping wives understand their role in family dynamics. Their role? I kept my voice neutral. Interesting phrase? You'll quit your job at Ironwood. It's causing unnecessary stress and making you act out. Now I did look up. Quit my job. We don't need the money. I make more than enough. And when Dad retires, I'll take over Caldwell Manufacturing. You should focus on starting a family. We've been married 12 years. Elena, Mom's beginning to think you're deliberately avoiding giving her grandchildren. What else? He seemed encouraged by my calm responses. You'll have a monthly allowance for personal expenses. $3,000 should be more than sufficient. All major purchases will need my approval. And if I refuse these terms, Mark set his phone down, came around the island, not to comfort, but to loom. Another tactic from Robert's playbook. Then we'll have to reevaluate our marriage. Dad's already connected me with Sterling, Bradshaw, and Associates. They're the best divorce lawyers in Ohio. You'd get standard alimony, of course, but the prenup you signed limits it to 5 years. And you'd have to leave this house, it's in my name. Actually, it wasn't. I'd quietly transferred the deed to one of my shell companies 2 years ago during a refinance Mark had signed without reading, but I kept that information to myself. You've thought this through, I said. We had a family meeting. Everyone agrees this is more than fair. Considering what? Considering you've contributed nothing to this marriage except embarrassment. The words came out rehearsed, Patricia's phrasing in Mark's mouth. You came from nothing, Elena. We elevated you. The least you can do is show gratitude. I studied my husband of 12 years, the man I'd once loved, or thought I had. Had he always been this weak, this cruel, or had I been too dazzled by the possibility of belonging to see what he really was? A puppet whose strings led directly back to Robert's fists. I need time to consider, I said finally. The Christmas party is in 3 weeks. You'll need to prepare your apology. I said I need time. Mark straightened his cuffs, another gesture stolen from his father. Don't take too long. Dad's patience isn't infinite. Neither is mine. He missed the warning in my voice, too confident in his position. I'll be staying in the guest room until you've made your decision. And Elena, choose wisely. You won't get a better offer. He left me alone in the kitchen with my half-prepared dinner and my thoughts. He actually believed I would cave. That faced with the threat of divorce, of losing my elevated status. I would crawl back to Robert and beg forgiveness for the crime of being punched in the face. I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah. They've made their move. Mark just demanded I quit my job, apologize publicly, and submit to family therapy to learn my role. Her response came quickly. Please tell me you recorded that conversation. I smiled, touching the tiny device hidden in my pendant necklace, a gift to myself after the first time Robert had called me trash at a family dinner. Every word. Perfect. When do you want to pull the trigger? I thought about the Christmas party, 3 weeks away. The entire Caldwell social circle would be there. Judges, business partners, the Ohio elite who worshipped at the altar of old money respectability. Let them think they've won. I'll play the confused, considering wife for now. And then I'll give them a Christmas present they'll never forget. The next 2 weeks passed in careful choreography. I played my part perfectly, the confused wife contemplating her options, gradually softening toward reason. Mark reported my progress to his parents daily, like a handler with a difficult horse being broken. Meanwhile, Sarah and I worked 18-hour days building our case. Every document meticulously verified, every financial transaction traced, every legal avenue explored, but the real artistry was happening through Pinnacle Financial Services. I sat in my locked office at 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, executing trades through encrypted channels, moving the Caldwell assets into positions that appeared stable but could be frozen instantly with a single command. Robert checked his accounts religiously. I could see the login timestamps, and each time he saw the numbers growing, right on schedule. The 61 million appeared healthier than ever. What he couldn't see were the legal frameworks I'd wrapped around each investment, contingency clauses buried in subsection after subsection, a financial spiderweb that looked like silk threads until you tried to break free and discovered they were steel cables. On December 15th, 10 days before the Christmas party, I discovered something that changed everything. I was reviewing Caldwell Manufacturing's contracts when I found an irregularity in the payment structure for their biggest client, the Ohio Department of Transportation. Payments that should have gone to suppliers had been redirected to a company called Buckeye Construction Services. Buckeye didn't exist except on paper, as a shell company registered to Robert's golf buddy, Commissioner Brad Thornton. They weren't just skimming, they were stealing from taxpayers, funneling state funds through a fake company. The evidence was all there, hidden in plain sight because Robert assumed no one would ever look closely enough. $15 million over 4 years. I called Sarah immediately, despite the late hour. "This isn't just fraud anymore," she said after reviewing the documents. "This is federal, FBI territory. How long do we have before we need to report it?" "Technically, you're obligated to report it immediately, but as long as you're not participating in the conspiracy." "Give me until after Christmas. 10 more days. Elena, they want me to apologize at the Christmas party, in front of everyone who matters to them. I need that moment. Sarah," she sighed, "you're playing with fire." "I've already been burned. What's a little more heat?" The next morning, Mark informed me that his parents wanted to meet. A reconciliation dinner, he called it. Just the 4 of us at their estate. Patricia had even offered to make my favorite dish her way of extending an olive branch. I knew exactly what it was, an ambush. I arrived at 6 p.m. sharp, wearing a conservative dress that screamed submission. My bruise had faded to yellow-green, carefully covered with makeup. I'd practiced my expression in the mirror, defeated but not broken, ready to bend but needing just a push. The dining room where Robert had punched me 3 weeks earlier had been rearranged. The table was smaller, more intimate. They'd removed the chandelier's dimmer, leaving it blazingly bright. Every detail designed to make me feel exposed, vulnerable. "Elena," Patricia air-kissed my cheek, her lips careful not to actually touch me. "You look lovely. That dress is so appropriate." Robert stood by the fireplace, drinking scotch despite his doctor's warnings about his liver. He didn't acknowledge me directly, making me come to him. Another power play. "Robert," I said quietly. "Elena." He examined me like livestock at auction. "Mark says you're ready to be reasonable. I've been thinking about what's best for everyone." "Good, good." He settled into his chair, the leather creaking. "Because Patricia and I have been very patient, very generous, considering the embarrassment you've caused." Patricia served dinner not my favorite dish at all, but lamb, which she knew I hated. I ate it anyway, each bite a small performance of submission. "The Christmas party is in 10 days, Patricia said, cutting her meat with surgical precision. "Everyone will be there. The Hamiltons, the Prescotts, Judge Morrison. It's the perfect opportunity for you to clarify things." "Clarify." Robert set down his scotch hard enough to splash. "Apologize. Publicly. Make it clear that you overreacted to a family disagreement, that you've been under stress from work and said things you didn't mean." "And then," I kept my voice small, uncertain. "Then we move forward," Mark said, reaching over to pat my hand patronizingly. "As a family, with you in your proper role." "Which is supporting Mark," Patricia said. "Being a proper wife, giving us grandchildren, not embarrassing us with your little job and your opinions. You'll resign from Ironwood next week. Robert added. Before the party, I don't want anyone thinking my daughter-in-law needs to work. They had it all planned. My complete erasure, my transformation into a Caldwell accessory. And if I do all this, I said slowly, we just pretend Thanksgiving never happened. Exactly. Robert smiled, the expression cold. Though you'll need to sign some papers. Just a formality, a post-nuptial agreement updating your prenup, to protect the family assets. From me, from any future misunderstandings. Mark squeezed my hand, too hard. A warning. It's very generous, Elena. Considering, I looked around the table at their expectant faces. They thought they had me cornered, broke, dependent, beaten. I need to see the papers before I decide. Of course. Patricia produced a folder from the sideboard. They'd had it ready. Waiting. Our lawyer drew them up. Very standard. Standard. I read through 30 pages that would strip me of any claim to marital assets, any right to alimony beyond the bare minimum, any chance of financial independence if I ever stepped out of line again. There was even a clause about conduct becoming a Caldwell family member that would void everything if I caused public embarrassment. This is very comprehensive, I said. We like to be thorough, Robert said. So, do we have an agreement? I looked up at them, these 3 people who thought they owned me. I'll give you my answer at the Christmas party. The pressure intensified over the next week like a vice slowly tightening. Mark moved from subtle manipulation to outright intimidation, leaving printed divorce papers on the kitchen counter, circling apartments in the newspaper's rental section for my reference, calling me at work to remind me that my decision deadline was approaching. Patricia called daily with helpful suggestions for my apology speech. Remember to mention how grateful you are for our patience, she'd say, and perhaps a small comment about your inappropriate workplace stress. Dr. Sawyer, the therapist, she's already agreed to take you on as an emergency case. But the final straw came 3 days before the Christmas party. I arrived home at 8:45 p.m. to find them all in my living room, Robert in Mark's chair, Patricia on my sofa, Mark standing by the fireplace like he owned the place, which he believed he did. But there was a 4th person, a slight man in wire-rimmed glasses holding a briefcase. Elena. Robert didn't stand. This is Dr. Harold Rathburn. He's a psychiatrist who specializes in difficult cases. Difficult cases. Dr. Rathburn smiled professionally. Personality disorders. Specifically, those that manifest as oppositional defiance and delusions of persecution. The room spun slightly. Excuse me. We're worried about you, Patricia said, her voice dripping false concern. Your recent behavior suggests you might be experiencing a mental health crisis. The paranoia about family dynamics, the hostility toward Robert, the refusal to acknowledge your role in the Thanksgiving incident. You're trying to have me committed, evaluated, Dr. Rathburn corrected. A 72-hour hold for observation. Purely voluntary, of course, unless the family feels you're a danger to yourself or others. And if I refuse, Mark stepped forward. Then we'd have to consider whether your mental state makes you capable of making sound decisions about your marriage, your finances, your future. They were threatening to have me declared mentally incompetent, to take control of everything they thought I had: the small savings account, my car, my freedom. This is happening because I haven't agreed to apologize for being assaulted. See, Robert turned to the doctor. The persecution complex. She genuinely believes she was assaulted when it was clearly just a family disagreement that got out of hand. Dr. Rathburn made notes. Mrs. Caldwell, would you be willing to discuss the incident from your perspective? Mrs. Ward, I corrected. I kept my name. Another sign of her oppositional nature, Patricia added helpfully. I looked at each of them in turn. The psychiatrist they'd clearly paid off. My husband who'd become my warden. His parents who wanted to erase me entirely. They'd choreographed this perfectly, the concerned family trying to help a delusional woman who'd lost touch with reality. I need some air, I said. Elena. Mark grabbed my arm as I passed. Let her go, Robert commanded. She needs to understand her options, sign the papers and apologize, or get the help she clearly needs. I walked to my office, locked the door, and called Sarah. They brought a psychiatrist to my house. They're threatening involuntary commitment. Record everything. I'm calling Judge Davidson. He owes me a favor. No legitimate psychiatrist can commit you based on one consultation about a documented assault. This is witness intimidation. They're escalating because they're scared. Or desperate. Have you checked the Caldwell accounts recently? I pulled up the Pinnacle interface on my secure laptop. Something was different. Robert had attempted 3 large withdrawals in the past 2 days, all flagged and delayed by the system for verification. He's trying to move money. He knows something's wrong. His instincts are telling him to run. But he can't. Not without my authorization. I smiled at the screen. He just doesn't know that yet. I returned to the living room 20 minutes later, phone recording in my pocket. I've considered your offer, I announced. Robert leaned forward. And I'll need certain conditions met. You're hardly in a position to negotiate, Patricia scoffed. I'm in a better position than you think. I turned to the psychiatrist. Dr. Rathburn. Are you aware that accepting payment to provide a false medical evaluation is a federal crime? That threatening involuntary commitment to coerce someone is considered kidnapping under Ohio law? He paled. I was simply asked to provide a consultation. You were paid $15,000 by Robert Caldwell 2 days ago. Would you like me to show you the bank transfer records? The room went silent. Robert's face darkened to purple. How could you possibly know that? The same way I know about Buckeye Construction Services, about the $15 million in state funds you've embezzled with Commissioner Thornton, about the second mortgage on this estate that Patricia never signed for. Patricia turned to Robert. What second mortgage? I also know, I continued, that you've been trying to withdraw large sums from your Pinnacle accounts. Having some trouble with that. Robert stood, fists clenched. What did you do? Nothing yet. But at the Christmas party, you're going to make an announcement. You're retiring from Caldwell Manufacturing, effective immediately. You're going to cite health concerns that liver of yours really is in terrible shape. Patricia, you'll be stepping down from all your charity boards to care for him. This is blackmail, Mark sputtered. No, this is negotiation. You wanted me to know my place, I do. It's several floors above yours. I turned to the psychiatrist. Dr. Rathburn, you should leave. Now. And if any paperwork regarding my mental health appears anywhere, the medical board will receive a very interesting package about your practices. He practically ran for the door. You can't do this, Robert growled. I can. I have. And at the Christmas party, you're going to smile and play along, or everyone in Ohio will know exactly what kind of man you really are. If you expose us, you expose Mark, your own husband. I looked at Mark, really looked at him. Weak, cruel. His father's puppet. That's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. The silence stretched taut as piano wire. Then Robert did something I didn't expect. He laughed. You think you've won. You think you can threaten the Caldwell family and walk away unscathed. He moved toward me, and for a moment I thought he might hit me again. You have no idea what we're capable of. Neither did you, I replied, until now. The Christmas party arrived on a crystalline Ohio evening, snow falling in perfect Hollywood flakes. The Caldwell estate glowed with 10,000 white lights, every window blazing, projecting prosperity and power to anyone driving up the circular driveway. I arrived alone at 7:15 p.m., fashionably late, but not disrespectfully so. Mark had texted that he was already there. Handling things. I wore a black Valentino gown, not rented, not borrowed, but purchased with my own money from my hidden accounts. $4,000 of Italian silk that moved like liquid shadow. The Caldwells had never seen me in anything worth more than $300. Elena. Patricia's friend Margaret Prescott gasped as I entered. You look different. Different. Yes. I'd visited a high-end salon that morning, had my hair professionally styled into an elegant chignon. My makeup was flawless, expensive, applied by an artist who specialized in television personalities. The bruise from Thanksgiving was invisible beneath carefully layered concealer. The great room held 80 of Ohio's elite: judges, politicians, business owners, the kind of people who appeared in the society pages of the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Robert held court near the massive fireplace, a scotch in hand despite his doctor's orders. He saw me and his jaw tightened. I picked up a champagne flute from a passing server and began to circulate, each conversation carefully chosen, each word deliberate. Judge Morrison. I smiled at the silver-haired woman who'd known Robert for 40 years. How's your grandson still at Yale? Graduating this spring, though these days, who knows if the degree is worth what we're paying? Oh, I imagine having the right connections matters more than the education itself, though sometimes those connections can become complicated. She looked at me sharply. Complicated how? Oh, you know. When personal relationships intersect with professional ones. When people feel obligated to look the other way because of old friendships. I moved on before she could respond, leaving her unsettled. Planting seeds. Commissioner Brad Thornton was by the bar, the man whose name was all over the Buckeye construction fraud. I approached him with a warm smile. Commissioner, I've been meaning to thank you. Thank me. He looked confused. For all your help with Caldwell Manufacturing's contracts. Robert speaks so highly of your flexibility. His face went pale. I don't know what you mean. Of course not. I touched his arm lightly. Enjoy the party. By 8:30 p.m., I'd made similar stops with 6 key people, each conversation innocent on the surface but laden with implications. The room's energy had shifted. People were whispering, glancing at Robert with uncertainty. Mark cornered me near the kitchen. What are you doing? Mingling. Isn't that what a proper wife does? You're threatening people. I'm having conversations. If they feel threatened, perhaps they should examine why. Patricia's voice cut through the party chatter. Everyone, Robert has an announcement. This wasn't planned. I moved closer as Robert stepped into the center of the room, his face flushed with alcohol and rage. Friends, he began, his voice carrying that false warmth he'd perfected over decades. Before we continue our celebration, I need to address something. My hand found my phone, starting the recording. As you all know, family is everything to the Caldwells. We've built our reputation on loyalty, on standing together against any adversity. His eyes found mine across the room, which is why it pains me to announce that my daughter-in-law, Elena, has been struggling with some mental health challenges. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mark grabbed my arm, but I shook him off. Robert continued. We've tried to help her privately, but her delusions have become concerning. She's made wild accusations, shown paranoid behavior. We're committed to getting her the help she needs. This was his play. Discredit me publicly before I could expose him. That's fascinating. Robert, I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. The crowd parted as I walked toward him. Since we're making announcements, I have one too. Elena, Mark warned. No, please. Robert smiled coldly. Let her speak. You'll all see what we've been dealing with. I reached the center of the room, standing directly in front of him, close enough that he could hit me again if he chose, close enough that everyone would see if he did. 3 weeks ago, at Thanksgiving dinner, Robert Caldwell punched me in the face. The silence was absolute. 21 family members witnessed it. Not one helped me. My husband, Mark, told me to apologize for being assaulted. See, Robert turned to the crowd. Delusions. It was a simple family disagreement. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the estate's built-in sound system with 2 taps I'd hacked into their Wi-Fi years ago and played the audio from that night. Robert's slurred insults, the sound of impact, Mark's voice demanding I apologize. The room remained frozen. "But that's not why you should be concerned," I continued, pulling out a folder from my purse. "This is—" I handed copies to Judge Morrison, to the district attorney who'd just arrived, to 3 prominent business owners. "Evidence of embezzlement, fraud, bribery involving state contracts. $15 million stolen from Ohio taxpayers through a shell company called Buckeye Construction Services." Commissioner Thornton dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor. "These are lies," Robert roared. "No, these are bank records, contracts, emails, all legally obtained through my position at Ironwood Capital and through Pinnacle Financial Services, which, by the way, I control—" Patricia's voice came out as a whisper. "What? Every penny of your $61 million portfolio is under my authority. Has been for 3 years. And as of—" I checked my phone. 7:43 p.m. tonight. "It's all frozen pending federal investigation." Robert lunged at me. This time, I was ready. I stepped aside, and he crashed into a decorative table, sending champagne flutes flying. 2 younger men, lawyers who worked for the DA's office, restrained him. "You destroyed us," Mark said, his voice hollow. "No," I replied. "You destroyed yourselves. I just documented it." Judge Morrison approached me, the evidence in her hands. "Ms. Ward, these are serious allegations." "Yes, they are. My attorney has already filed copies with the FBI, the Ohio Attorney General, and the State Ethics Commission. I wanted to handle this privately, within the family, but they chose this instead." I looked around the room at the stunned faces, then back at Robert, who was still being held back. "You told me to know my place. I do. It's standing on the ashes of everything you built on lies." The next morning came with a symphony of consequences. Robert's arrest at 6:45 a.m. made the morning news. Federal agents walked him out of the estate in handcuffs while Patricia stood in the doorway in her silk robe, mascara streaming down her face. The mighty Robert Caldwell, reduced to a perp walk in front of the cameras he'd once commanded. Mark had disappeared sometime during the night, taking nothing but his Mercedes and whatever cash he could grab. He left a note. "I never knew you at all." No, he hadn't. He'd never tried. By noon, Caldwell Manufacturing's board had called an emergency meeting. Without Robert and with the federal investigation looming, they voted to restructure completely. The employees' pension fund I'd protected remained intact. 300 workers kept their jobs. A court-appointed administrator would run the company until the mess was sorted out. Commissioner Thornton resigned before lunch, claiming personal health concerns. The dominoes were falling exactly as I'd arranged them. I sat in my home office, my real office, no longer hidden watching the news coverage while Sarah sat across from me, reviewing paperwork. "The divorce filing has been submitted," she said. "Given the circumstances and the evidence of assault, we're requesting expedited processing. The house is already in your name through the shell company, so Mark has no claim. His prenup works against him now. He gets nothing of yours. And the frozen assets will be tied up for months, maybe years. The FBI is very interested in Robert's dealings. Patricia might avoid jail time if she truly didn't know, but their fortune is gone. The estate will be seized for auction. Their cars, jewelry, everything will go to pay restitution." "Good." Sarah studied me. "Any regrets?" I touched my face where the bruise had been, only that it took me so long to show them who I really was. 3 weeks later, I stood in the empty Caldwell estate. The auction was tomorrow. The Persian rugs had been rolled up, the paintings removed, the mahogany table where Robert had hit me already sold to a collector in Columbus. Patricia found me in the dining room. She'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks, her perfect facade cracked beyond repair. "Did you come to gloat?" she asked. "I came to retrieve something that belongs to me." I pulled down a small painting from the servants' hallway, a piece I'd bought years ago with my own money, before I'd learned to hide my wealth. Mark had relegated it to the back corridor, embarrassed by its common origins. "You destroyed us," Patricia said, echoing her son. I defended myself. There's a difference. Robert's facing 20 years. He's facing consequences. Also a difference. She pulled her cardigan tighter, not cashmere anymore, just regular wool from Target. How long were you planning this? I wasn't planning anything. I was protecting myself, building my own life independent of yours. The revenge only came when Robert's fist connected with my face and my husband told me to apologize for it. Mark loved you. Mark loved the idea of me, the submissive wife from humble beginnings who should be grateful for his attention. When I stopped playing that role, where was his love then? Patricia had no answer. I walked past her, painting under my arm, and stopped at the door. You want to know the real irony? If you'd just treated me with basic human dignity, none of this would have happened. I would have kept my wealth secret, lived my quiet life, and let you all continue your charade. But you couldn't do that. You had to try to break me. So you broke us instead. You broke yourselves. I just refused to be collateral damage. I left her in that empty room, surrounded by shadows where wealth used to hang. 6 months later, I sat in a coffee shop in Seattle, 3,000 miles from Ohio. My laptop showed the latest numbers from my legitimate business ventures. No more shells needed. No more hiding. $490 million and growing. The news alert popped up on my phone. Robert Caldwell, sentenced to 18 years for fraud, embezzlement. I deleted it without reading the details. That chapter was closed. My phone rang. Sarah. Mark's been arrested, she said. Turns out he was deeper in his father's schemes than we thought. The FBI found evidence on his computer. I'm not surprised. He's asking to talk to you. Says he wants to apologize. No. That's what I told his lawyer. Oh, and Patricia's working at a department store now. Macy's, actually. The same one where I used to work. Poetic. Poetic justice. Maybe. After we hung up, I opened my journal and wrote, "They told me to know my place." I did. It was standing on my own 2 feet, building my own empire, refusing to shrink myself to fit their narrow definition of acceptable. They thought my silence was submission, but it was strategy. They mistook my kindness for weakness, my patience for passivity. They never understood the most important truth: real power isn't inherited or married into. It's earned, built in shadows and silence, accumulated transaction by transaction, decision by decision. They had wealth, I had hunger. They had legacy, I had purpose. In the end, they were right about one thing: I did need to apologize. Not for being hit, not for fighting back, but for taking so long to show them who they were really dealing with. The bruise on my face healed in 3 weeks. The bruise on their legacy will last forever. And that cold November night when Robert's fist met my face, that wasn't the moment he won. That was the moment he lost everything. Because you should never underestimate a woman who's been building her own empire while you weren't paying attention. You should never mistake silence for surrender. And you should never, ever, tell her to apologize for your sins. I closed the journal and looked out at the Seattle rain. Somewhere in Ohio, the Caldwell name was being scrubbed from buildings, removed from charity plaques, erased from the social register. But my name, my real name, Elena Ward, was just beginning to be known. They'd told me to apologize. This was my apology. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm curious to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect across the globe. If this tale of revenge and redemption resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in Elena's position? Share your perspectives in the comments. And let's discuss how sometimes the best revenge truly is massive success.